You're watching the Cowboys Report. I am Tom Downey, and the Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf trade rumors are back once again. It's kind of like how in Episode 9, somehow Emperor Palpatine returned. The Love of the Star podcast, Bobby Belt, Bryan, Broaddus, discussed the idea of trading for a wide receiver, and they briefly mentioned Deebo and DK. First, the quote from Broaddus. Samuel, Metcalf, I think you want to keep in touch with those teams. Just so if we get to the point where you get into training camp and you're not happy, you're talking about potential pup for Michael Gallup. So yeah, keep those warm possibilities, sure. Anything's possible in the NFL. We've seen that. And Jerry Jones has been willing to move picks, multiple picks even, to make sure he gets a wide receiver. Now look, Broaddus is right. The Cowboys have been, historically speaking, aggressive at wide receiver. Roy Williams, Joey Galloway, Amari Cooper, signing big guys like Terrell Owens. They are not afraid to go big at that position. But I've seen this story picked up by major media outlets. Undisputed took it wildly out of context. The context of this whole conversation from the podcast is at least somewhat lacking, and I think the further along this story goes, the more extreme the game of telephone gets from like, yeah, sure, maybe super chat or maybe it's a possibility to it's going to happen. Like, it just game of telephone gets out of control, right? Belt and Broaddus both view that as unlikely, and I think we all should view it as unlikely for a pretty wide array of reasons we'll get into. The layout of that Metcalf Deebo portion was, I'll call it the break in case of emergency situation. I think there are very valid reasons to be worried about the wide receiver room. That was the real context of that conversation. It's to look at cheaper options, like a Chester Rogers, for example, a guy we've mentioned before on the show, of other options at wide receiver. Because Gallup might not be good for week 3 or week 4 or week 5. If James Washington doesn't impress, you're down to Lamb, a third-round rookie, and a bunch of guys with little to no production. So there is the possibility of that receiver room having major concerns and trouble. And if it's bad, that is where I think you could see a situation involving a DK Metcalf or a Deebo Samuel start to emerge. We'll go more in depth on both guys and why it should still be viewed as highly, highly, highly unlikely, despite what clickbait headlines and YouTube titles you might see from others out there. But pick one. If in the grand scheme of things you could acquire one, it was reasonable and it happened, who would you rather have? DK for DK Metcalf or DS for Deebo Samuel? This is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. So if you're watching on YouTube and the ad break comes, take advantage of it. Head down there, type in DK or DS. There are some significant issues with any potential trade involving Deebo or DK. Number 1 is the cost of a new deal. Number 2 is the cost of a trade. Number 3 is the long-term roster fit, the big picture. It's a short-term need, unquestionably. Is it going to be a need come Week 18? If it is a need in Week 18, that's where it starts to make sense. Let's go one by one, beginning with number 1. Freaking expensive. The Cowboys had Amari Cooper at $20 million and went, no, we don't want that. And that is barely a top 10 receiver. In fact, it's actually tied for, I think, like 9th now with like 4 other guys among the highest paid receivers. In the event you trade for Deebo Samuel or DK Metcalf, you are giving them $100 million. You're paying them $425 or $525, and you are making them a top 5 highest paid player in the NFL. Maybe you get lucky and it's only 24, but Scary Terry's deal was a 3-year deal. They like 5-year deals. The longer you go on a deal, the more expensive it is. It would be a massive amount of money to pay a receiver in the growing market and a lot for Catboy Stephen Jones. On top of that, you're also giving up premium draft capital. The A.J. Brown trade should be viewed as the baseline, the minimum for any potential trade of DK Metcalf or Deebo Samuel. That was a first and a third. Now, I think the Cowboys' first would be viewed as a little bit less, and the third probably a bit better since it was a very late third-round pick after all. But You add DK or Deebo, you're the favorite to win the NFC East. You're thinking maybe that pick's 24. It's not as valuable as A.J. Brown. You might need to give up more from a perspective standpoint to acquire one of those premier receivers. And remember, it's Stephen Jones, not Jerry, who's running the show more and more these days in Big D. Now, we are also on Rumble. This video first aired as part of Cowboys Report After Hours live on Rumble. If you want that exclusive live segment and you want to be a part of our shows on Rumble and you want free and uncensored content, go subscribe. Rumble.com/Cowboys TV. It is free. That link will be in the comments section and it will be in the description of today's show. The other part of this is the long-term wide receiver outlook. The Cowboys have paid Michael Gallup a decent chunk of change. CeeDee Lamb is also due for a new deal as soon as next year. Are you going to pay CeeDee Lamb if you trade for one of those receivers? You're banking on Lamb emerging as your number one guy this year. That is the hope and your plan. And you will be without Michael Gallup for at least the first couple years of first couple games of the season. That's a big difference there. But you're also, and I feel good about Jalen Tolbert being a key part of your team long term. If you've got Lamb, Gallup, and Tolbert, and they all get healthy and play well by week 5, do you need DK Metcalf or Deebo Samuel? The answer is no. Now, you might be struggling the first couple weeks of the season as those guys get healthy and acclimate, but you're not giving up a first and more and $25 million per year for, well, we got to get through the first month of the year. That's not how teams do business. Now, in the break in case of emergency scenario where Gallup's not healthy and there's problems there, or, man, Tolbert's not the guy we thought he was going to be, that could change things. But I don't think that's the expectation right now for Dallas. So what do you think? Will the Cowboys make a trade before the season? Or I guess in the extreme emergency, if they don't think Lamb's the guy anymore. 1 for yes, 0 for no. Will the Cowboys make any trade for a receiver before week 1? Let's break down both players now more in depth and why I think I got the preferred option if I had to pick one. Deebo, of course, has linked himself to Dallas strategically. Photo with Dak Prescott. Liking Cowboys edits on Twitter. The only like he made. He knows what he's doing. He also requested a trade from the 49ers. But I don't think they're going to trade him because Shanahan used him perfectly. And I've seen some national narrative of, well, Deebo's only good because he was a running back. No. Deebo Samuel was balling as a receiver last year. The running game stuff did pick up as the year went on, and he was used more heavily in the playoffs. But Deebo Samuel, purely as a receiver, was a borderline All-Pro. 77 grabs, 1,405 yards. He added 365 on the ground in the regular season. He was dynamic. He was electric. He was so perfectly utilized by Kyle Shanahan. It was impressive that the way he used him as the get him in the backfield, get the ball in his hands in space. And that's my concern with Deebo in Dallas. Do we trust Kellen Moore to utilize him properly? Do we trust the Jones boys to allegedly not interfere with the way they want the offense to be run? I'm not so sure. And that's my big doubt and question mark when it comes to Deebo and the Cowboys. I don't know if I trust Kellen. Hell, they have a tough enough time getting the ball to Tony Pollard in creative ways. Can they do it with Deebo? I'm not sure. Now, if you want more Cowboys videos, hit the button, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Rumble. If you're watching on Rumble, hit the green button, rumble.com/Cowboys TV. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the red button at youtube.com/Cowboys TV. Links to both Rumble and YouTube in the comments section, in the description. Make sure you guys are subscribed by hitting that button right now. DK Metcalf is looking for a new contract, meanwhile, from the Seattle Seahawks, and he skipped minicamp. Unexcused absence, by the way. I still believe that the likely outcome here for the Seahawks and Metcalf is a big fat new contract that would make everything all better. And Metcalf fits the timeline for Seattle in terms of being able to rebuild, etc. Now, Bleacher Report has proposed a trade already between these two sides, so we'll break it down. Metcalf in exchange for a first and a second round pick. I actually think the value is about right. It's not that different in terms of where the picks will actually end up being compared to the A.J. Brown deal. And no disrespect meant towards A.J. Brown, but I think I'd rather have DK Metcalf than A.J. Brown. So would you do that deal? Right now, you're the Jones boys. You're in charge. Would you do that contract or that trade? D for deal. You'll take on DK, say bye to your first and second round pick, or type in ND for no deal. Never mind the alleged bad blood between those two orgs. That's more so the Jets than anything, but get your votes in. D for deal, ND for no deal. Funny enough, by the way, on the newly released ESPN top 10 wide receiver rankings, Deebo and DK were both in the top 10. Deebo at number 9, barely ahead of DK Metcalf. Guys like A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb were in the honorable mentions category. I think of all the positions, they should have gone to 20 or 15 for the wide receiver room. There's too many good ones. And DK unquestionably is one of those guys. Look at his career production. As long as opposing defenses do not put 3 cones on the field to confuse him, he has been dominant despite some injuries at quarterback this past year in Seattle and that team's inability to get the ball to both Metcalf and Lockett in the same game. I think Metcalf, as a big-bodied vertical threat with speed and some elite size, I think I would rather have Metcalf than Deebo Samuel for this particular team. Other teams like the Niners, I'd rather have Deebo unquestionably. For Dallas, with what this team has right now in terms of the coaching staff, the quarterback, all of it, I would rather have DK Metcalf over Deebo Samuel. But remember, I don't think that deal's going to get done. I think it's still on the pipe dream side of things.